And hello, welcome to another mini harp lesson to those of you who are watching on Facebook. If anyone here is here for the first time, my name is Susanna and I'm a harpist and harp teacher living in Edinburgh and teaching harp. And today we're going to be talking about semiquavers, rhythms involving semiquavers, especially dotted rhythms, and how to make them less panicky, because I think everyone experienced that at some point in their musical playing, that seeing all black makes us play faster, makes us feel a bit anxious, makes us feel like it's more complicated piece in general. Important message for myself, and please help me with this today. I'm going to try and speak more slowly because I know I'm speaking with an accent and I know I have a tendency to speak fast, especially when I'm anxious, and being live is one situation which can cause a bit of stress. So if I'm speaking too fast, please wave at me, please tell me off and tell me to slow down. That will be most helpful, not only for me but also for anyone who will watch later and who will want to understand a bit better what I'm talking about. As usual, there is a PDF which goes with that lesson, and that PDF is available to download on the resources page for Instagram. You'll find the link in the bio, and for those watching on Facebook, the link is in the description, and you will find some rhythmic exercises which will help, especially those of you who still feel new to that or still feel daunted by semiquavers, lots of semiquavers and dotted rhythms. I'm just going to quickly check my notes because I had quite a few things. Oh, one very important thing is I will be saying I'll be talking about semiquavers, quavers, crotchets a lot, but for those of you who are watching, tuning in from the US, you may not be familiar with those terms because they don't really they don't really exist in American English. So if I'm talking about crotchets, I mean in fact quarter notes in American English. If I'm talking about quavers, this will be 8th notes, and semiquavers are 16th notes. I'm sorry, this is going to be a bit confusing from those of you who are not familiar with this, but I think because I'm not too used to using them, it will be quite confusing for me, and I'm worried that I will get too mixed up with all that. So I'll just stick with British terms. If you download the PDF, right at the top of the page there is a little mini dictionary which give you a handy cheat sheet to see what's what if you have any problems. So go there now if you want, and you can that will help you with watching that. And I said already that I'm going to speak slowly. I hope I'm doing not too bad so far. And let's move on to the topic, and why this topic, why I think this is something which might need a bit attention. I think a lot to do with semiquavers, dotted rhythms becoming a bit of a problem, or something which causes a bit of anxiety, is that there is a lot of them. They are all black, so it looks like there is just a lot of paint on the paper, and they tend to be written much closer together than, say, a piece which has lots of minims or just minims and crotchets. And I think this is somehow visual factor, purely visual, and it's very similar to when you compare children's book with big letters with not too much text on the page, and then kind of adult book which has smaller fonts, size of the font, more text on the page, fewer drawings if any. And I don't know if you remember when you were learning to read the music is quite similar process actually, but I remember how the very first books that you were using at school when you were still learning to read were starting with very short text, quite nicely spread out, some drawings, and then as you progress later in the book, the size of the font was becoming a bit smaller, there was more text to read, less space between paragraphs and so on. And when you are just starting and then looking at the back of the page, you feel, oh, this is going to be so serious. And I think you may get that feeling as well if you're looking at a book with music and then flipping at the last page and seeing all the semiquavers or 16th notes. and that might be the similar feeling. So I think it's quite important to connect the visual stimulus, what you see on the page, with how it feels when you play it. And this is what the first exercises are about. I've put the line of semiquavers, and if you want to make sure that it's all steady, you can put the metronome on. I think a good speed for each semiquaver would be 120, and I would start with just tapping the semiquavers, either clapping or tapping on your knee, and you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and so on to know where exactly you are. It's quite useful for all these rhythms to think of a group of 4 for semiquavers. And then I would try to skip every second semiquaver, which means that you will get the rhythm of quavers. And if you're doing that with a metronome, skipping every second beat. And then going to crotchets, where you just tap the very first of each group. And if you watched my live about playing with the metronome, you will find a lot more exercises which will help you with that. That's live 14. If you go to the page where all the lives are, you will find it there. And you can download the PDF as well. Let me just check, open the PDF for today's lesson and just check that I'm telling you things in the right order. Yes, I am, and at the same time I noticed a typo in the document, so I might just sneakily swap them around after this live. But if you download it, I'm sure you will understand what everything means. So moving on to other rhythms where you've got 2 semiquavers and a quaver. It's usually written on the page with all 3 under one line, but it might be easier to think about this if you think that this is just quaver to quavers, quaver to semiquavers, quaver to semiquavers, so quaver to semiquavers, quaver to semiquavers, or you can think about this as 3 semiquavers pause, 3 semiquavers pause. And on the harp, similarly to percussion instruments, the rhythm is mostly about when we plug the string. So because we don't necessarily we are not really able to hold that last note, so having the pause at the end doesn't really matter to us, but might help you to think about this rhythm from a different perspective. Those 3 variants of writing it down will sound exactly the same on the harp or on a percussion instrument, but thinking about this in 3 different ways might help you become more familiar with that. And then I would try to tap that rhythm together with the semiquavers, so you really get the feel of where a semiquaver is missing. So if you look at the page, I've put the right hand line, which will be tapping the semiquavers and quaver rhythm on the top, so it will be going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Underneath, the left hand will be going first with semiquavers, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then left hand will swap to quavers and then to crotchet. So in the end you will have right hand tapping the top line, left hand tapping the bottom line, and you will try to get them together, and getting it right will also help you look at the relationships between these notes. And now I realized I promised to show you the book that I recommended a lot in the stories and in some of the previous lives. Let me just get it because it's a bit further away from the laptop. And I'm back here again. So that's the book, Flip the Rhythm, and I know that it's in the mirror reflection, but I can post a link to where you can buy that book later, and you can see some more of that book in the highlighted stories on Instagram. But basically it's a really interesting book where you got it cut in half. I'm just trying to make sure everyone on Instagram sees as well, so I'm just going to move the harp for a second. So it's cut in half and it's printed on both pages, and the book can be used from both sides. That's part 1. but you can also flip the rhythm and use it from the other side, which has slightly more complex rhythms. And the main idea behind the book is mixing the rhythms for the right hand and left hand. The point is usually to tap the top line, like you see on this page. Top line is for the right hand, bottom line is for the left hand. You can also swap them around. I think it's important if you play an instrument like harp or piano, where the top line is usually the right hand line, left hand line is bottom line is for the left hand, and so on. So yeah, and you can also use that book. They say you can play some of the rhythms on your instrument and tap the other hand, or play both lines and just improvise some kind of a melody. It's got lots and lots of rhythms, not only dotted rhythms, but also triplets, some simpler rhythms, including just quavers, meaning 8 notes, and crotchets, quarter notes, to some really advanced ones. And what I find really good about this book is that you get to work on rhythm in separation from the rest of the pieces. There is no music unless you make it up, and that helps you get that, improve with that without worrying about your technique, about your fingering and things like that. So really highly recommended if you're new to music, especially if you're new to music and musical notation. That's a great book. Okay, let's move on with the rhythms. We just discussed the 2 semiquavers and quaver. If you swap them around, you will get the rhythm quaver, 2 semiquavers, which will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you still keep thinking about those semiquavers underneath. And I would recommend doing exactly the same thing as above, tapping with your left hand the semiquavers, then the quavers and crotchets, while right hand carries on with that rhythm. And you can still use the metronome, you can still use it on 120, you can also go slower or faster if you want. And then we're moving to dotted rhythms, which most typically include dotted quaver, dotted 8 note, and the semiquaver. I think I'm kind of using the American terms anyway. And I think I didn't get too confused now, but hopefully it will be okay until the end. So with those dotted rhythms, it really helps to keep thinking about that group of 4, because the dotted quaver, any dotted note in fact, is the value of the note itself. So a quaver would have 2 semiquavers plus half of its value. So 2 plus half of 2, 2 plus 1 equals 3. So the dotted note will be 3 of the smaller ones. Here in our case, dotted 8 note or dotted quaver is 3 semiquavers or 3 16th notes, and then there will be a semiquaver. So we can have either 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, dotted quaver and semiquaver, or we can have a quaver semiquaver quaver. So we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That second rhythm is a bit less common. I find that there's a lot more of the first rhythm, long, short, than the other one, but they are both really useful. And again, I would try tapping them over semiquavers, quavers, and crotchets, and trying to get them together. And I can see that we've got people from Australia watching. Would you mind telling me what terminology you use in Australia? Is it British with semiquaver and quaver, or is it American crotchet 8, or do you use a mix of both? Just so that people from Oz are watching, and I was wondering what's used there. Coming back to the dotted rhythms and that exercise with trying to get them together with different rhythmical values, you might find it quite tricky to do the middle bar in the PDF, which is getting that rhythm over quavers, because that will sound like, maybe I'll tap on the harp so you see my hands and you will see me tapping. I just need to focus and stop talking to get it right. So right hand will be doing the dotted quaver, semiquaver, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Left hand will be doing the quavers, so together that will sound like So you can hear, if you shut your eyes and you just listen to that rhythm for a bit, you will see that you are getting, in fact, quaver, semi, semi, quaver, semi, semi. You just need to know which hand is going to tap first. And that's one way to think about it. The other way is trying to get your quaver really solid and listen to the quaver, and then getting the first one together and the second in between. Yeah? So same for the other rhythm, the semiquaver, quaver. Here you will be thinking that your right hand wants to get the first one together with the left and the second note just after that. So we'll be getting... And again, if you shut your eyes, you will see that this is exactly the same rhythm as two semiquavers, quaver. So I hope this will help you to get a bit more familiar with that, and I would really encourage you to practice this rhythm on their own first, with tapping away from the instrument, unless you choose to tap gently on the harp as I'm doing. And highly recommended book, Flipper Rhythm, for anyone who wants to have more inspiration than just a few short exercises. I hope everyone on Instagram can see that there's not too much glare. Okay, and let's move on to the piece for today. Yesterday I was playing very near the Edinburgh Castle, and I could have a peek at the military tattoo with the Scottish bagpipe band marching. It was very impressive, and I hope it will get me in the right mood for today's piece, because it's a composition by Karen Marshallsey, who is a Scottish harp player and composer. She recently released her first CD, Road to Kennacrike, and in advance I'm really sorry if I don't get all the typically Scottish words right. I don't know that language, so correct me if you do. Karen specializes in Scottish harp and traditional Scottish music, but actually I know Karen to play all harps. I have seen her play pedal harp, lever harp. I think I haven't seen her, but I know that she plays the wire harp, so name a harp and Karen plays it, and she has a lot of knowledge about not only traditional Scottish music, but music in general. And I was asking her for some more information about how you would learn a piece which is typically Scottish. How would you approach it, and hopefully giving you a bit more inspiration, not only from the classical musician like myself point of view, but also from other ways of learning. So maybe I will play that piece first before I talk a bit more. It feels like I've been talking for a while now, and you will hear what it's like, and then I will say a bit more and I will play a bit more as well. The title of the piece, there is a Gaelic Scottish title which I'm afraid I won't attempt to pronounce. I'll put it there in the description of the live after the lesson, and you will see why I will not dare to pronounce it. But the English title is There You Go Boys by Karen Marshallsey. And just let me move everything so I don't obstruct your view. And here we go. That was the piece, and I hope if Karen is watching she will like it. It's gotten quite windy here actually, which gave me a bit of a fright as I was playing. I don't know if you could hear that in the recording, but it gets quite windy here in Scotland. Anyway, you could hear that there were a lot of dotted rhythms, and that you hopefully heard that they were also quite varied. We got a lot of dotted semiquaver, dotted quaver, semiquaver, and semiquaver, dotted quaver. So especially at the beginning you will have tam 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 already. I spoke to Karen about how do you get these rhythms accurate. If I was teaching that piece with the music, I would really I would really stress the necessity of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, because then you make sure that this right hand is really accurate. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, that was the wrong rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Karen said that this could work as well. In traditional Scottish music, you would probably rely much more on learning from hearing and singing the music. And she said that also she likes to think about the slightly less common rhythm, the semiquaver, dotted quaver, the 1, 2, 3, 4. She said that she likes to think about this as dirrum, saying that word. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Apparently it works much better with Scottish accent, which I don't have. So that's one way, finding also some words that you can use for this rhythm to make them really accurate. Then she said that in a performance, when you perform it with a group of musicians, you would listen to the fiddler, to the person playing violin, and try to be really together with them. And interestingly, in a performance, the longer notes would tend to get a bit longer, and shorter would get a bit shorter. So if we say that the rhythm is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, then in the performance you will probably get almost having 7 to 8, not 3 to 1. And I think that's really important for someone who is playing that on their own, to make sure that you're counting at least 1, 2, 3, 4, because the tendency is when you play a piece like that to get a bit less accurate, and then in that case those semiquavers and quavers would turn into quavers, something like tam. And this is definitely what the piece is not. So I would say, from my perspective, if you can't learn from listening, if you just have the music, try counting 1, 2, 3, 4. If you are confused, you can also write small lines. I would write 3 lines under the dotted quaver and 1 line over a semiquaver connected with a line on top, to show you visually how many beats need to pass before you are to play the next note. Some general advice about learning pieces with rhythms which might be slightly challenging, or in fact any piece, because lots of pieces have very varied rhythms. I would say if you're a beginner, try to do it all one step at a time. So I would start with making sure you get the notes right. So maybe try not to even play any rhythm, and maybe don't worry too much about the fingering, but just see that you spot all the repeated notes, that you spot any patterns which are moving in steps, that you read correctly any sorts of big jumps, and you can use your index finger just to give you an idea of the geography of the movement. The next step out of 3 would be fingering, again without the rhythm. Very often you will get the fingering written in the music, and in that case I would say try sticking to it at first. If there's no fingering, don't worry about it too much. I know that some people will say that the speed affects the fingering, and I agree, it absolutely does, but I think that if you try to find the perfect fingering straight away, you will get yourself in a bit of a pickle, because you will be trying to work on too many things at the same time. So I would say try to come up with some sort of fingering that you think will work, and just put it there and try to get that fingering right. So if you've got turns, make sure that the fingers go back together. So if you've got something like that, that second and third go together. If you've got some more varied fingerings, for example 3, 1, 2, make sure that the second finger doesn't go in, because this will all affect your accuracy when it comes to putting the rhythm in. And maybe something more about the fingering. Karen sent me an example of another of her piece, and I could see that the fingerings were quite different from what I would be using, and it's quite important to be aware that in classical playing, especially if you play on a big pedal harp, the fingering might be quite different than what you would use in traditional music and playing on lighter instruments. I think on the big pedal harp or in classical harp playing we use a lot of the thumb. We sometimes use the thumb even just to hold on when we repeat the notes, while in traditional music you would you would just change the fingers and try to get that effect like that. You would play a lot of these sort of notes. So if you're studying with a teacher of particular tradition, just trust them that they know how to find the fingerings which is best for you. I would avoid mixing things. If you even if you think that the other one is better than the first one, try to stick to what your teacher is saying, and don't mix too many things at the beginning. What I like with the book that this piece was published in the book for Scottish exams is that there are no fingerings in, so even a teacher who is not teaching in traditional Scottish tradition, they can still use those pieces, put whatever fingering they think is suitable, and teach them to their students, because they are really good pieces, and it's I think really important to hear different types of music. So fingering, try to decide for a draft version of fingering, and you may want to correct it later with the rhythm. And then rhythm finally. If you've got lots of semiquavers, I would say count 1, 2, 3, 4. As I said earlier, write over the notes the lines. If you want, write a group. I think I'll post on my website a scan of my music where I would show you an example of me doing that, so you see what it looks like. Very important, keep it slow. Do what I'm trying to do today with talking slow. And I can see some comments. No, that these were not comments, just waves. I was worried that someone would say that I'm speaking too fast, but so far so good, I hope. And then the last thing about the rhythm, one hand at a time. I know that when we were tapping earlier, we were trying to get both hands tapping, but if you've got funny rhythms, try to work on one hand first. Here in Karen's piece, you will find that the right hand is the one that will need a lot more of your attention with all the rhythms. So work a lot on that hand. Probably adding the left hand will not be as hard when you are really confident of what you're doing in the right hand. And I think that's everything for today. I hope it's not too windy where you are. I would definitely not want to move the big harp around today. The next live will be next week, and I will have a nice treat for you because it will be a last live before my holiday, so you will get a little gift from me. So tune in next Friday, same time, 11 a.m. Looking forward to seeing you there. Have a nice weekend. Bye.